Welcome back. So the other type of division that I referenced there's two types. The second type is a synthetic division. Now this is my personal favorite. I love synthetic division. I find it easier than long division. Unfortunately, it only works with linear things where the x has no coefficient with it. Okay? If the x has a coefficient with it, that means that that you have to deal with long division. Otherwise, you can use this synthetic division, this shortcut division. Now, this first part, this is just a quick overview. All right. So if as you're going through your practice work and you get stuck, here's a spot where you can reference to see the step-by-step process. I'm going to start with a fresh example. So I'm going to start down here. And what you want to do, you start by looking at this term here. And you pick the number that is opposite that. So what would make that 0? Okay, so if you've seen x minus 5, it means that you're going to use a positive 5. And then you line up the coefficients of every term. So 1x cubed, negative 8x squared, 17x, and a minus 10. So I'm only concerning myself with the coefficients of what is there. Okay? And now I can begin my synthetic division process. I'd simply drag down the first number, and then I multiply by that 5. So whenever I get a number down there, I multiply it by 5. Then, whenever I have them stacked, I end up adding. So negative 8 plus 5 is negative 3. Now, I multiply. That gives me negative 15. Now, I add. 12 plus negative 15 leaves me 2. Now, I multiply. Now, I add. And I always offset that last number, okay? I always offset it because it's special. That last number is actually always the remainder. So in this case, that means I have a remainder of 0, aka I don't even have a remainder. Then I always start with this. That's my new constant. That's my x. That's my x squared. If there were another number, that would be my x cubed. So now I want to answer back in the form of a polynomial. So I would write this out as 1x squared minus 3x plus 2, and there's no remainder. So you always want to make sure that you put it back in its in a polynomial form, okay? Don't leave it in that chart. Actually answer as a polynomial. All right. So again, once you understand that structure, it's actually not too horrible. So I focus on the x plus 10. Well, that means I'm going to be using a minus 10 as my magic number. 1x squared plus 19x plus 90. And now I begin. Pull down the 1, and then I multiply by that negative 10. Now I add, and now I multiply by that negative 10. Now I add, and again, I want to offset that last number, okay? That last number is special. The last number is always the remainder. Then I start working this direction, constant, x. Well, this time that's actually the end, all right? So I have 1x, 9 is my constant, and that's actually just what I get when I divide it. But again, don't leave it in that table, that little chart. You want to make sure that you write it back as a polynomial. Another thing to remember, just like long division, when there's a hole, when you're missing a term, you need to make sure that you put it in as 0. So first thing, I focus on that. So my magic number is going to be a -2. Now I write out my terms. 1x cubed, 7x squared, 0x's, that's where my placeholder 0 comes in, then a -4. And with that, I'm now set up for my long division. Put down the first number. Now I want to multiply with that -2. Now I add. Now I want to multiply with that -2. Now I add. Now I want to multiply with that -2. Now I add, and that's actually the end. All right. And again, you always want to offset that last number because that last number is always your remainder. Then you'll have your constant, your x squared, so on and so forth. So when you write this out, I have 1x squared, 5x's, -10 is my constant, and a remainder of 16. And always remember the remainder stays as part of the fraction. So that 16 as a remainder stays with the x plus 2, and that is going to be my final answer. All right. So thank you for joining me for this notes. Again, make sure you have all this written down. Because again, it's not difficult, it's just a new process that you have to remember. So make sure you have it written down so you can reference it when you're doing your practice work. And then come and ask if you have any questions.